if you were advising a founder today, right? If you were sitting next to a founder, where would you tell them to focus their time first? You talked about pipeline, you talked about getting their solutions ready, you talked about co-build and all that. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. In order to be successful partner with AWS, because let's face it, ISVs, unlike consulting partners or managed services providers, ISVs are customers first of AWS. So they have built their solutions on AWS. They're spending a lot of money, many of them, a lot of money with AWS. But majority of them, they are successful anyway without being a partner with AWS. So from that standpoint, an ISV can be successful, but partnering with AWS can amplify that success and can bring additional revenue. So partnering with AWS is just another way of reaching more customers and getting in front of more customers. And this should be taken seriously, and the ISV, well, the founder should be prepared to cover the bases that will make their offering exciting for AWS folks that they're trying to impress so that they can get in front of AWS customers. So there is a number of foundational elements that they should do. First and foremost is really establish the partnership and follow the first few foundational steps. They could be mundane, they could be boring, they could seem unimportant to a founder, but they are the building blocks which are critical, and without them, no partnership will be successful. The second portion would be, as I mentioned, aligning the solution roadmap to the AWS expected launches and services development. That goes a long way, especially having in mind that with new service launches, there are always partners that are being uh, showcased as early adopters and showcasing their solutions and how that impacts their customers. So that is a big thing. That's free marketing for ISVs that to get in front of a lot bigger audience, and of course coming from from AWS. Um, then really important is to for the founder to understand to have a clear marketplace strategy. AWS marketplace is a whole world of itself. It has its own programs, it has its own features. It is a whole world that can unlock a lot of hidden opportunities for the ISVs to get more revenue. So building a marketplace strategy early on is really important. That means, among other things, equipping the ISV sales reps with the knowledge how to use marketplace as a door opener and an accelerator to close deals rather than just another program out there, as well as making sure that sales reps are well compensated for deals that are going through marketplace as well as outside of marketplace, which is quite often a significant blocker for success for ISVs.
Yeah.
But really, I've seen that an ISV will adopt a marketplace strategy and then it's kind of in isolation. And then the sales reps will just go and talk to a customer as if there is no marketplace listing for the ISV, and they leave money on the table, they lose revenue. I'll give you an example. A lot of business applications ISVs think, okay, well, the AWS customer audience is technical and they will not procure business applications through AWS Marketplace. Well, that's not necessarily true. What happens usually with this kind of ISVs is that they go and talk to an enterprise customer, and the customer loves their solution. They say, well, you know what? I love your solution. It's great. However, I have a problem because today I don't have a budget to go ahead and purchase your solution. So we need to wait until the next budgeting cycle, which could be 3 months or 6 months or 12 months away. Now, if the sales reps are well prepared, they would easily have an objection saying, well, you know what? Since you are procuring from AWS Marketplace, you actually already have a budget in place and you're incentivized to spend that budget on third party ISV solutions like our solution. So we can help you get in touch with the right people in procurement and IT that are facilitating this, and then you can have your new solution purchased in the next 2 weeks instead of waiting for months. So that's a huge deal opener, and without AWS Marketplace, it's impossible to have this kind of deal breakthrough.
I love that perspective of yours, Bajra. So what you're saying is, don't work in isolation. It must all work together. Comp neutrality piece, what you touched, is very important. Most often that's been overlooked, and there is a lot of internal competition and so on. So thank you for that perspective. Now I want to move to the third segment here, which is I want to focus on GTM motion because there's so much noise out there about GTM motion, but there's very little truth. So you and I activated several ISVs together. Love your perspective on what GTM motions actually work in the field. Like what motions are still there, which one is shifting. What do ISVs often underestimate about GTM?
Yeah. Again, like any other thing, that there isn't one single GTM motion like do webinars or do this or that. That there isn't a single one that is the silver bullet. It's usually a concert of GTM motions that lead to success. I would highlight several though. First and foremost, there is a number of AWS programs, mostly partner programs, but not necessarily only partner programs, which are underestimated and kind of hidden. I mentioned, for example, the Workload Migration Program. So think of it that way. ISVs, there is a big number of ISVs that have still a legacy solution which is installed on premises at the customer infrastructure. And then they have also built a SaaS version of this solution. And usually it's part of their strategy to try to migrate as quickly as possible their on-premises customers to the SaaS version so that they don't need to support two different versions, as well as, for all the obvious reasons in terms of revenue and cost optimization. So that's usually part of a big portion of their strategy. And it is a go-to-market route or motion to try to accelerate that migration process. And Workloads Migration program from AWS is doing exactly this. So it offers a lot of funding, which is available to the ISV to offer either to their end customers or to utilize in terms of reducing costs for all the different migrations that they are going to do. So ISVs that embrace that program, they see tremendous success. Usually ISVs have a plan to finalize migrations within 3 to 5 year period. When ISVs utilize that kind of the WMP or the Workloads Migration Program, they migrate 90% of their customers within 2 years, and that brings a lot of benefits for the ISV in terms of revenue and cost optimization. So that's just an example. So understanding what are the right programs to support different go-to-market motions is really important, and then obviously align around these go-to-market motions. As I mentioned, marketplace is a big is the preferred route to market for AWS when it comes to partnering with ISVs. So any activities to promote, I mean, marketplace is just a different channel, another channel out there. So any activity that promotes this channel is absolutely beneficial. And again, there is a number of programs that are marketplace specific which are available, like for example free tiers or buy with AWS, which are all different programs that amplify the messaging and the outreach to end customers and potential customers for the ISVs.
Got it. I love what you talked about, the co-marketing stuff. So, just staying on this topic, Bojidar, how do you see co-marketing and co-selling evolving together?
Yes, so well, obviously, co-marketing is really about creating a pipeline. So, of course, it's also building awareness, but ultimately, we want to measure marketing by the number of leads that we get and how many of them transform into opportunities and how many of them actually lead to closed deals. One of the very much underestimated things is using the AWS brand. So there is a number of things that ISVs kind of miss. First is to make sure that they participate in AWS-led events, whether that's going to be reInvent, whether that's going to be summits, whether that's going to be industry-specific events, webinars, or even just outreaches. That is a big gap. So ISVs should find ways to participate in these events, see what are the requirements, and make sure that they align to those. Another aspect which they miss is when they do their marketing events, their own marketing events, like whether it's webinars or in-person events or customer events or whatnot, they should always bring in AWS people to participate in these events because that amplifies the messaging. That also works towards increasing the credibility
Yeah.
as well as it attracts obviously more people. So AWS marketing is existent now. The thing is that the number of AWS dedicated marketing folks is decreasing or staying constant, where while the number of partners are growing. So people have to be creative. They have to take advantage of what is available, as well as work with third parties that are well aware on how to navigate the AWS marketing engine, which is obviously not easy with such a huge company.
Agreed. 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 I think we should do a separate a podcast on that as well, how to navigate that. Okay, so I want to move. Thank you for that, Bojidar. That's very valuable. I want to move to the last segment on this podcast, which is about how to build trust. Right. Would love your perspective on what signals matter the most for, like, it could be PDMs, AMs, or PSAs. When they are deciding which ISVs to champion, like how can founders and GTM leaders build trust with AWS teams?
Yeah, right. So yeah, like most of the hyperscalers, like Microsoft and Google, AWS is focusing on a fairly small number, I would say less than 1% of their total number of ISVs. With decreasing number of PDMs and partner stuff in general, it's becoming increasingly harder for ISVs that are not established yet to get noticed. So there is a number of things or shortcuts that ISVs can take to amplify that messaging. Um, as I mentioned earlier, number one is really the solution. So if an ISV has to be very aware of how their solution impacts the customer, the end customer, but also how their solution impacts the AWS spend of that customer. That is probably one of the most critical aspects of when an AWS representative, whether it's sales rep or PDM or whoever, will look at that ISV in general based on their solution. As I mentioned, the more disruptive the solution is, the more attention they'll get. But really, it comes down to several things. One is making sure that ISVs communicate very clearly how their customers are benefiting from the solution through references. Now, references go a long way with AWS, and it's in Amazon's culture in general, not just AWS, to measure success through customer success. So if you look at all the keynotes during reInvent and during the summits, you always see that when AWS announces a new service or a particular success, they always start with a case study. They always start with a customer story. So customer ABC adopted this, and they immediately saw reduction of their costs or improvement in their efficiency. That is what matters for AWS. An ISV can go to AWS and say, "Well, we have that great solution. It's doing these fantastic things, and no one else is doing it." But it won't matter if there is no customer story to support it. So references, they are no longer mandatory for partnering with AWS, but they are mandatory if an ISV wants to be important, to be seen by AWS. That's number one. Number two and three is that an ISV has to understand that they have two different audiences that they need to target with marketing efforts. One is the internal AWS audience, so they have to be really targeted motions and activities to create internal awareness within AWS. And the messaging for the AWS teams is completely different than the one that is going for end customers. So that is what I would say is more of a tactical approach. So engage with different people from different teams, from the sales teams, from the services teams, from the partner teams, from the technical teams, any teams that they can get their hands on, but have a very well prepared messaging for these teams. So it cannot be our solution is great, or it cannot be this solves this customer problem alone. It has to be different. It has to be targeted based on the audience. And then the second thing, which is more strategic, is to establish a relationship with AWS executives. And one of the things that ISVs underestimate and struggle with is to think big. Probably the most direct route to senior AWS executives is to ask to meet them and discuss something big, which could be, well, we may introduce Gen AI into this particular solution that we have, which is going to bring a revolutionary new way of doing business for this particular industry. That is a big thing. AWS loves this kind of exercises. That is a great way for an executive at the ISV to establish a relationship with an executive at AWS. So thinking big is very important. I have seen in my lifetime with AWS many times when we facilitate a meeting between very senior AWS executives and C-level people from ISVs and other partners. And the meeting goes like, "Oh, how are you? We're well, and how is your partnership going? Oh, it's going great.
Yeah.
And everything is fine. We've struggled sometimes with Partner Central, but it is going to be fine." And that's a conversation nobody wants. Just to say hi. There is no value, not for the ISV, not for the AWS executive. But if there is something very specific to discuss, like this is a segment that we are currently not covering. Not you, AWS, you're not doing well there. We have an opportunity to go after it. Let's join forces and go after it. Let's get the required resources allocated from your side, from our side, and let's go and make money. That's a different conversation, and that's the conversation that AWS execs are expecting. So, ISVs that adopt that early and frankly, it goes. I mean, we don't have enough time, but it goes through the think big
Approach.
exercise that AWS has, which is working backwards from big ideas, and this is how Amazon in general operates. And but ultimately, it's not easy for an ISV to get noticed by AWS to build this kind of strategic relationship, and this is where third-party companies like yours, but others as well. This is what they can really help with ISVs, and can bring an ISV from zero to hero. So yeah, I'll stop here.
I love that zero to hero. I love how you touch the proof points. The validation on the customer stories and joint references is very critical when an ISV is building the early relationship with AWS. So that was being very incredible. Your insights. That brings us to the end, Bojidar. So thank you very very much for sharing your experience, your perspective, and the real truth behind what actually works and what does not. Right. Every time we talk, I'm reminded of the clarity you bring to the AWS ecosystem, and honestly, how much the founders and GTM leaders needed to hear this. So for everyone listening, if you're an ISV trying to scale with AWS, I think this episode is the one you really want to replay. Again, Bojidar, thank you very much for joining me at the Gen GTM show.
Yeah, thank you, Jen, and good luck for all your listeners. And I really hope that it has been valuable for your ISVs.
Thank you.